Intelligence. Introduction. We've all heard of these popular claims. We have limited intuition. Only God can understand everything. Collectively we know a trillionth of what there is to know. We still are in the dark of intelligence. We humans are mere ignorant mortals. Our intelligence is extremely limited. There may be an alien race out there that has superintelligence and knows all the intricate details of the universe. And they could have the technology to time travel to Earth at any moment and take over our planet. Ever wonder why these often parroted claims are never accompanied by justifying arguments? Do they sound plausible to you? Why or why not? As this article will explain, such statements are often parroted by people who have no answers to the questions which make or break their arguments. Hence, they are quick to inject the mystery of limited intelligence into the conversation in order to save their argument from instant death. There are even folks out there who claim that we humans are utterly confused because the universe is so complex. Just because they are confused, they shouldn't assume that others are as well. If these folks had bothered to educate themselves to understand the difference between an object and a concept, they may have a chance at understanding the root of their confusion. But for many folks out there, confusion, ignorance, complexity, and mysticism provide a sense of comfort and security. Does intelligence have physical limits? Like a border of sorts? Can a god be more intelligent than us? Is there a possibility for superintelligent aliens in the universe? Is it possible to quantify intelligence with an IQ test? Was Albert Einstein a genius? Let's examine these and other issues in detail. Is there a limit to intelligence or understanding? The universe may seem extremely complex to us. Almost everyone assumes that humans have limited intellect and can never hope to understand the workings of the universe. If we hypothesize a god who created the universe, could he not communicate in our language all the intricate workings of the universe? Would we not understand his teachings? What is it that could possibly prevent us from understanding anything in reality, even with the proper instruction? Is it possible for other intelligent life in the universe or even for God to have superior intellect compared to us petty humans? Question: what is the physical limiting barrier for intelligence? Is it some barrier where information can't get through? Answer: none. There is no barrier when it comes to learning and understanding, ignoring any medical issues of the brain. It is our sensory system which has limits because of its physical bandwidth response to sensory stimuli. Fortunately, our intellect has no such limits. Our intellect is not predicated on external stimuli. We are in full control over our intellect. We can conceive of anything and most certainly can understand anything that God can explain to us. Intellect has no physical bandwidth limitations like our senses do. Why not? Because the intellect is a dynamic concept. Intellect is an action that we perform with the atoms of our brain. Intellect is not an object, like our retina, which responds to external stimuli from light and thus has a physical bandwidth limit, i.e. frequency response or detail resolution. Objects have physical limits, concepts don't. Concepts are the relations or interactions between objects. Intelligence is first and foremost a concept or verb, an activity that is mediated by the interactions of atoms in our brain. It is our brain biology that is responsible for mediating this verb we call intelligence. So the fundamental question to ask all the skeptics out there is: question: what limits could such atomic interactions, brain activity, possibly have? I mean, atoms do indeed interact with each other via surface-to-surface contact and signal transmission. What else could they possibly do above and beyond that? What else could an atom do to another atom other than physical interaction, which would lead to an alleged increase in intelligence? Anyone? These are the critical questions which, when answered, make or break the limited intelligence claim put forth by the skeptic. And these are the issues that people fail to understand because they never sat down to critically analyze the concept of intelligence. So it's no wonder why religion has enjoyed the prosperity it has had here on Earth. And it looks like it will enjoy it forevermore. Your priest will always tell you that we humans have limited intellect because we mortals cannot possibly understand the mysteries of the universe. God works in mysterious ways. Most people, theists, atheists, brights, secularists, freethinkers, objectivists, etc., will memeize this by rote and chant it like a mantra in forum discussion all over the internet. Only God, or insert other authority, can understand the universe because of his superior intellect. This is why we need to trust in gods, authorities, and celebrities. Actually, your priest or figure of authority is telling you to trust in him. So you've just been bamboozled without even realizing it. Intellect is a dynamic concept that is ultimately subject to the process by which atoms in our brain interact to mediate the activity we call comprehension understanding. Intelligence facilitates understanding via the process our brain performs when relating the objects of our experience and identifying patterns and the utility of the application. These associations are called concepts. There are only objects out there in our environment, i.e. universe. All of our understanding is ultimately rooted in associating these objects. The primary purpose of concepts is to allow intelligent beings to form cognitive units of understanding that can be used in the communication of thoughts. Concepts are therefore used to build languages and to provide beings with a system of cognitive classification and organization, which enables them to acquire intelligence on an unlimited scale. Since this article makes reference to concepts, you may want to visit the article below to understand what a concept is. Link in the description box. Understanding is the process of conceiving relations between objects or other concepts and being able to apply them in accordance with their specified context of utility. Therefore, understanding has no limitations. Understanding is strictly a thought process which identifies relations between objects and gives meaning and utility to them. Intelligence and understanding go hand in hand. If you can understand the mathematical relationships of the concepts in calculus and apply them towards solving problems, then you are said to be intelligent in calculus. Let's consider God and his alleged infinite intelligence. If God can understand it himself and explain it to us, then so can we. There is no reason why God can understand how he created space and matter, and we cannot. This is just an excuse to create mysticism and spread a religion to establish a following. All animals have intelligence, otherwise, they wouldn't be able to hunt and do other activities to support their lives and their offspring. Even a cat can associate the objects, mouse, ground, and herself with the concepts, chase, catch, eat and live another day. So when we say that we are more intelligent than animals, what we are actually saying is that we have the capability to conceive of and utilize many more concepts than animals do. As living entities, we are similar to cats, but we are no longer confined to just hunting for food. Our usage of concepts has evolved along with us to facilitate language, education, societies, culture, jobs, etc. Furthermore, the evolution of our social worth has led to the explosive emergence and utilization of even more concepts that are applicable to the anthropocentric utility of our era. For example, our technology, computers, financial economy, national structure, laws, taxation, etc. have led us to establish new relations of concepts and even abstract concepts to support applications in these new domains. Hence our collection, understanding, and utilization of concepts, i.e. intelligence, goes above and beyond the cat's domain of chase, catch and eat. And it is these complex interrelations between objects, concepts, and even abstract concepts which have led to our mass confusion about what constitutes intelligence and whether it has any limitations. Many will conclude that they don't have the intelligence to understand how the complex global financial economy works. But that's not what they mean. They are actually telling you that they have not committed themselves to learn and understanding all these interwoven conceptual relations in this domain of study. Just because they don't understand these complex concepts as of yet, we cannot objectively label them as less intelligent than a prestigious PhD and Nobel Prize winner in global financial economics. Is this Nobel winner a god with super wisdom? Is this Nobel winner smarter than the rest of us peasants who can't ever hope to attain his celebrity status? Obviously not. Any peasant has the intellectual capacity to learn all these complex concepts just as well, if not better, than our prestigious Nobel Prize celebrity. It is impossible to reason why a measly peasant can't accomplish this in light of the fact that human intelligence has no limitations. Remember, intelligence does not bow down or curtsy to whatever idol human wishes to subjectively worship. Mother Nature couldn't care less about the Nobel Prize beauty pageants humans invent to reward subjectivity. Reality is objective. Reality does not depend on human apes and their petty opinions. If the proponent of an argument can't rationally justify his claim, then even he doesn't understand it. So what does the fact that he has a Nobel Prize have to do with intelligence? If the proponent cannot justify why human intelligence is limited, or even why those with prestigious titles and celebrity status have greater intellectual capacity than a mere peasant, then this charlatan has just created a new religion. And it is quite evident that this religion is alive and well and with a huge following. I mean, just look at everyone who parrots "we have limited intuition" or "you're not smarter than the authority XXXXX," without even being able to justify their trite empty statements. What does the word intelligence mean? The word intelligence derives from the Latin verb intelligere, which derives from intelligere, meaning to pick out or discern. Indeed, that's what intelligence involves, the action of discerning relations between objects. We need to perform some action which will have a beneficial mental effect, i.e. understanding, before we can classify ourselves as intelligent. This is what the whole realm of human intelligence is ultimately rooted in, picking out relations and applying them in context to their utility. Intelligence can be rationally defined in no ambiguous terms as follows: intelligence, the ability to conceive of concepts and apply them. Question for those who still think that a concept such as intelligence can have limits: please explain where physical limits could fit in the definition of intelligence. If you don't like this definition, then you are free to provide your own rational definition and use it to answer the question. It is the individual who limits their own intelligence. Obviously, there is no provision for any physical limitation when it comes to intelligence. Remember, all of our understanding and reasoning ability comes from the conception and utilization of concepts. Hence our intelligence is only limited to what we are willing to conceive, learn and apply towards the building of our pool of concepts, i.e. intellect. If we don't want to be any more intelligent, nobody can force us. We don't have to take those math courses and learn the relations of calculus or algebra. We don't have to take grammar courses to learn the relations of words in the language. And we certainly don't need to waste any brain activity to critically reason what objects could mediate the phenomena of light and gravity in the universe. But if we want to be more intelligent, then we must force ourselves to do so, we must be proactive. There is no magic pill that gives us intelligence. If people are limiting their participation in this verb which we call learning, then what does this subjective behavior have to do with whether intelligence has intrinsic physical limits or not? Intelligence is a concept with no limits. But as a concept, intelligence requires a mediator. The mediator is you, not the person who spoon feeds you. Intelligent is what you make of yourself. Can any being, even God, have superintelligence? Superintelligence is a self-refuting notion. Mythical stories of superintelligent beings such as God or aliens are usually uttered in church bake sales, atheist conventions, pseudo-philosophical assemblies, and Scientology conferences. It is impossible for any being in the universe, including God, to have a superior intellect which no other being can achieve. If there really is such an assumed superior being, i.e. God, alien, a PhD, a Nobel-decorated authority, or other celebrity, then there is no reason why he can't rationally explain his proposals. God obviously works with objects in his cosmic shop in the universe. He allegedly moves objects like planets, moons, stars, and atoms around the universe. He even uses objects as mediators to establish these conceptual relations, i.e. phenomena, we call gravity, light, magnetism, and electricity. All of these phenomena are dynamic relations which are mediated by objects. God certainly doesn't work in mysterious ways by moving concepts around. I mean, concepts are relations, so they have no way of moving if they are not entities in and of themselves, right? Therefore God should be able to explain to us all the static and dynamic interrelations between the objects in the universe. This is how we can understand the internal workings of the universe. If he can't explain it, or if he gives us excuses that our intelligence is too limited, then obviously he is not who he claims to be. He is but another man-made messiah who is looking to be decorated with a fancy title and establish a following. If the authority, i.e. priest, PhD, Nobel-decorated authority or other celebrity, which we worship, and hang his autographed picture on the wall, cannot explain to us the conceptual details concerning his claims, then he is nothing but a snake oil salesman. This charlatan has appealed to the human-enforced dogma of authority which emotionally compels every human on this planet to worship and never question anything. This charlatan has just pulled the wool over our eyes because we have been systematically conditioned to be trite followers and pathetic pushovers for authority. Unfathomable superintelligence is a myth perpetuated by authorities and special interest groups who have no answers to the questions asked of them. So they raise the stakes by throwing in our face that we mortal humans are so stupid, know so little, and will never know everything. And we are expected to believe that this is the reason why the authority can't answer your questions. And every follower in the audience nods and says, yeah, we are but mortals. We cannot be so arrogant as to expect to understand such mysteries. That's what everybody has been trained to memorize and parrot from kindergarten to university. Of course, this tactic enables the authority to persuade you into his religion as a faithful follower. And what's worse is that you didn't even have a clue of what just transpired before your very eyes. Let's face it, at the end of the day we may not fully understand certain aspects of the universe. But to insinuate that we do not have the capacity or intelligence to understand them if God or someone else explained them to us is beyond lunacy. Any aspect of the universe can be understood by humans via the conception and utilization of relations between specific objects. We don't even need a God to rub his infinite wisdom unto us. We have the intelligence to conceptualize and critically reason the internal workings of the universe or anything else we set our minds to, all on our very own. Claim, some ideas just cannot be understood. Many authorities in our society, like priests, philosophers, mathematicians, and other celebrities, will religiously claim that certain words or ideas cannot be understood by us mortal humans, e.g. God, soul, spirit, immaterial, heaven, hell, transcendence, absolute, creation, space, wavicle, time, energy, force, field, dark matter, singularity, space-time, warped space, before the Big Bang, after the Big Crunch, quantum mechanics, relativity, string theory, M theory, etc. But they won't hesitate to turn the other cheek and instantly contradict themselves by decreeing their claims as proven facts of reality which you have to accept. Such claims amount to none other than that we can never hope to know God's mysterious ways, but we know he created the universe argument repackaged. This is a popular tactic used by those who have their own agenda to push on the unsuspecting public. If we can never understand these words or ideas, then how the heck do their proponents understand them well enough to be authorities on these issues? Do they have direct access to God's wisdom and we don't? This is what they need to answer. Clearly, something is rotten in Denmark, we are being lied to. The proponent of this tactic has an ulterior motive. He wants you to swallow his argument so he can push his wonderful religion on you and gain your support, because after all, only he has all the answers. These proponents have the insatiable fetish to spread the nonsense that there is something humans can't ever understand but just bring forward the smartest aliens in the universe or God Almighty himself. Whatever either explains to us, we will understand. Humans have the highest level of intelligence available in the universe. Mother Nature cannot possibly make us more intelligent than we already are. Sure, she can give us a better and more powerful sensory system, but this has no relevance to intelligence. We can understand anything that is explained to us in a rational manner with what we already have. It is only man-made idiocy and irrational garbage claims which we can't understand, and for obvious reasons. Fortunately, Mother Nature's universe functions rationally and can be understood. Just like God in his cosmic workshop, the universe only moves objects around, not concepts. It is the proponents of the limited intelligence argument who are irrational, as evidenced by their inability to rationally justify their sweeping statements and resolve their contradictions. These charlatans palm their intelligence card and use their sleight of hand to generate mystical assumptions in order to confuse and misdirect us. Their intention is to prevent the instant death of their theories. There is no question that we, and all beings like us, have the best intelligence Mother Nature can ever give to any being in the universe, even to God. It is impossible for God's intelligence to be greater than ours. And there is no limit to our intelligence because we have the capability to understand any concept which is related, defined, and explained to us. In the case of aliens, we would merely have to go through a learning curve to understand their technology or other concepts just like we go through a learning curve to understand math, engineering, or computer software. All concepts are conceived and associated by a man, so he is responsible to define what each concept means. If he can't define or explain it, then he cannot understand it himself. He amounts to nothing but a charlatan or a priest with an ulterior agenda. Consider the scenario where a Nobel-decorated authority invents a new word, say clamacaptica. It is very easy to make this word as powerful as God by merely associating tons of mysticism around it. Furthermore, it is even easier to brainwash the whole population of the planet to parrot this word day in and day out for the rest of their lives. How, you ask? By simply using authority to push this word onto the masses with arguments which appeal to people's emotions, the unknown, to popularity, to science, to fantasy, among others. When you ask all these people what clamacaptica means, their authorities already trained them to parrot. Our intellect is extremely limited, so we can never understand what clamacaptica actually means. It cannot be defined since it is outside the human realm of experience. It's like asking what is north of the North Pole. Nevertheless, this word is 100% real and reality depends on it. Maybe in the future, science will be more advanced and able to make observations on what this word represents. But for now, you're just gonna have to accept this word because it is backed by PhDs, Nobel Prize winners, and other people of importance. Oh please, do people in this day and age still swallow this BS? How can the human race continue to be this gullible from one generation to the next? It doesn't work that way for the rest of us humans who aren't pushovers for statements from authority. The rest of us have a brain and are critical thinkers. We understand the difference between objects and concepts. As critical thinkers, we can reason and understand anything on our own. We simply ask this charlatan to unambiguously define the word clamacaptica. We remind him that we are critical thinkers and we explain to him in no uncertain terms that all concepts are defined. Whereas we can either point to or illustrate objects and name them. The realm of human intellect is predicated on objects and their relations, i.e. concepts, because the universe is only comprised of objects. There is no other category besides object or concept. Obviously, limited knowledge, celebrity status, authority, arm twisting, etc. plays no role here. So the charlatan has no other choice but to define clamacaptica in no ambiguous terms for the audience. If he can't, then he was lying and treating us like fools all along. Can intelligence be quantified with IQ tests? Just what is it that an IQ test objectively quantifies? What exactly is this incorporeal, timeless and ethereal entity that an IQ test attempts to quantify, i.e. count? Does the tester actually count something inside our brain and compare our quantity of 120 with our neighbor's quantity of 150? Does an IQ test count particles of intelligence? Question: if it doesn't count any object which exists, then how can an IQ test possibly quantify the concept of intelligence? Answer: an IQ test does not quantify, it only measures. That's the distinction. What is this distinction, you ask? For those who don't understand the difference, we quantify by counting, for example, the number of atoms in a person's brain. We measure by relating the test score tally to a predefined standardized table of scores which was agreed upon by a show of hands from an authoritative committee of humans. I mean, we certainly don't roll a tape measure against the concept of your intelligence and tell you that yours is shorter than your neighbor's. So then, how do we objectively measure intelligence? How about this? Since intelligence is the ability to conceive of concepts and apply them, why don't we just score on how many concepts an individual can understand and apply towards solving problems in a given time? Indeed, this is exactly what an IQ test attempts to do. Question: so then, what's the problem? I mean, we do have an objective way of quantifying, via scores, the IQ of individuals which corresponds directly to the definition of intelligence, right? Answer: wrong. IQ tests do not quantify intelligence. They merely relate, i.e. measure, scores against a predefined standard. Only quantifying, i.e. counting, entities, like marbles, is objective. Measuring, i.e. relating to a standard, is always subjective. Even still, there is no meaningful way to measure, i.e. relate, and rank the intelligence of an individual. IQ tests always have built-in biases, statistical extrapolations, subjective standards, time limitations, and outright sweeping assumptions about which concepts a so-called intelligent individual should have experience with. It is impossible to take IQ tests and their scores meaningful because it is impossible to apply predefined standards to any specific individual. What makes IQ tests next to worthless is the fact that people naturally come from various walks of life. Some may have experience in concepts such as math, sequences, patterns, etc. Others may not. Does that make them less intelligent? Can't those who scored lower understand such concepts under the same conditions of experience as those individuals who scored higher? Obviously, there is no rational argument as to why they can't, other than that they don't wish to do so. So that doesn't mean that these folks are less intelligent. It just means that these folks were not exposed to such concepts or don't have extensive experience and practice applying them. It certainly doesn't mean that they can't learn and score just as high as others on an IQ test. If a person isn't privileged enough to have an education, wouldn't they have the capability to increase his IQ score? There is no rational justification for why they couldn't. Since IQ tests are based on a subjective set of decreed parameters voted upon by a show of hands, then what do you figure is the meaning of a score of 120 versus one of 190? Does this conclusively certify that the individual who scored 190 is leaps and bounds more intelligent or more capable than the individual who scored 120? In fact, experience has shown us that in many instances the opposite is the case. So how does the IQ test committee resolve these dilemmas in their doctrine? They don't, and neither do they care. When you take an IQ test, you are bound to conformity with whatever subjectivity is entailed within that discipline. This is written in fine print. The bottom line is that you cannot outstudy another individual and be more prepared for the IQ test if intelligence was F𝔸TF𝕀ST rather than measured. Just because a peasant hasn't studied calculus and algebra before, doesn't mean that he isn't capable to study and get at least a 95% on the exam. Question: so, what does this tell us about IQ tests and the alleged measure of intelligence? A. Intelligence is a concept. Consequently, it is impossible to quantify. Furthermore, there is no objective way to measure it because it is inevitably predicated upon a pre-voted standard which extrapolates subjective conclusions. Was Albert Einstein superintelligent, a genius? Consider a real-world example, Albert Einstein. This man is typically considered the epitome of intelligence, an incredible genius. Wikipedia, Albert Einstein, a 20th century symbol of scientific genius. Wikipedia, his great intelligence and originality have made the word Einstein synonymous with genius. His political views emerged publicly in the middle of the 20th century due to his fame and reputation for genius. Wikipedia, Einstein's brain was removed within 7.5 hours of his death. The brain has attracted attention because of Einstein's reputation for being one of the foremost geniuses of the 20th century WordNet. Einstein, someone who has exceptional intellectual ability and originality, e.g. his smart but his no Einstein. Why is Einstein considered to be even above and beyond the word intelligent, i.e. a genius? Just what did this person accomplish that can be qualified as a genius? Here are just a few of his best accomplishments. Special relativity, which is based on 0D photons that are impossible to exist. The dilation of time, which alleges that time is an object that can stretch like an elastic. General relativity, which is based on space being an ether that can warp and bend like a mattress. According to the general theory of relativity, space without ether is unthinkable, for in such space there not only would be no propagation of light, but also no possibility of existence for standards of space and time. Albert Einstein. Let's review Einstein's alleged status of genius once again. Does it take a genius to tell us the nonsense that Einstein's theory of relativity proposed? Who among us is foolish enough to swallow these impossible claims? Does light really consist of zero-dimensional, 0D, photon balls that can't even exist? Relativity clearly fails on this simple test of existence. Einstein even admitted before his death that he didn't know what light was it 0D particles or something else? How can time possibly stretch when time is a concept? Can we stretch the concept of intelligence when we can't even quantify it? Time is the relative measure of motion between a minimum of two objects and a counting device with memory. If the universe was comprised of only a single lonely object, there would be no time. In fact, there would be no mass or energy, so E equals mc squared would fail as well. Time does not exist because time is conceptual, i.e. a human established relation between three objects, sun, earth, and a counting device with memory. How does one bend space when space is nothing? Space has no boundaries or edges to grab onto and bend, for if it did, then what is outside its edge? More space. If space was an entity on which the Earth rolls on, i.e. relativity's gravity well, then we would have been squashed by it a long time ago since we live on the surface of the Earth. Clearly, to allege that space is an entity that warps so the Earth can roll on it like a ball rolls on a warped mattress is self-refuting. Obviously, Einstein's intellectual parrots and disciples failed to see the painful lesson a lonely Einstein learned before he died. Of course, the common folk out there aren't aware of these scientific details and continue to treat the name Einstein as a synonym of genius or superintelligence. In 1919, in reference to Eddington's alleged confirmation of his theory, Einstein remarked that his theory was correct. However, he wasn't as cocky by the time he died. The punchline is that Einstein died as an atheist of his own religion of relativity, writing to his friend Besso in 1954 that all these 50 years of conscious brooding have brought me no nearer to the answer to the question, what are like quanta? Nowadays every Tom, Dick, and Harry thinks he knows it, but he is mistaken. I consider it quite possible that physics cannot be based on the field concept, i.e., on continuous structures. In that case, nothing remains of my entire castle in the air, gravitation theory included, and of the rest of modern physics. Albert Einstein. Anyone who reads the many letters Einstein wrote about his struggle to understand light, space, time, and gravity will conclude that Einstein lost his faith in his own theory of relativity, and indeed, in all of mathematical physics. He was at least aware that he and all the mathematicians were wrong. Perhaps that only qualifies him as the most intelligent mathematician ever, but that's not a whole lot, is it? So, was Albert Einstein a genius? If you read and understood this article, you should have no problem providing your own unbiased and critically reasoned argument. If you like, you can share your answer in the comments section along with your reasoning to support your argument. Conclusion. There are no limits to human intelligence or understanding. Our intelligence is directly based on relating objects to facilitate understanding. As such, we have the capability to relate any objects in the universe in order to fully understand its internal workings. IQ scores are no different than beauty pageants, they reward human subjectivity rather than anything objective. There is no mythical superintelligence in the universe. God and aliens relate the same objects as we do to facilitate understanding. Consequently, they are no smarter than us petty humans. Contrary to popular folklore, there are no geniuses among us, there have never been, and there will never be. We are all human, we are all made of the same brain, all our brains function the same, despite the fact that there are many who will venomously oppose these statements, if not this whole article. After all, they have a religion to protect. So the next time you hear someone say, intelligence is limited, tell them to take control of their person and learn something instead of bellyaching incessantly.